Hello, and welcome back to Alice Talks Football and what has been a chaos day inside Manchester United. Dan Ashworth sacked out of nowhere, and nobody really knew the reason why. It was like, well, you waited 6 months for him to come in, you paid 3 million gardening leave, and you've sacked him 5 months later. They said mutual agreement, but we knew that was not the case. Something had gone down behind the scenes, and there was a lot of nonsense being spewed about today that the reason he was sacked is because Dan Ashworth wanted Southgate. The top comment on my video earlier is good riddance because he wanted Southgate. That is not true. That has now been confirmed as not true. Dan Ashworth never wanted Southgate. I had a very good source come to me with information months ago about Southgate, and he said that Dan Ashworth has never even discussed Southgate. He's not on Dan Ashworth's list, and that has now been confirmed again today. But we have got interesting insight from The Athletic about Dan Ashworth potentially being afraid to make big decisions. And there is reports saying that it did get quite explosive and there's a few disagreements inside Manchester United. So in today's video, we're going to break down all the news, all the story. We're going to start by the reliable news. We're going to start with talking about the reliable news. What is Romano? What is The Athletic? What is David Ornstein? What is The Times? What have the actually reliable sources said about Ashworth, what's gone down and why he's been sacked? And then we will touch upon what the less reliable sources have said. But I'm going to say this now. The less reliable sources have said, it was because he wanted Southgate. He never wanted Southgate. That is not true. Do not believe that. These less reliable sources are the ones linking us to Gyökeres. Soon as Amorim got the job, we were linked to Gyökeres. They had no idea if we were going to go for Gyökeres or not, but they thought Amorim and Gyökeres work together. Let's link United to Gyökeres so United can we can get a few clicks on United news and pretend we know stuff. The same ones that were linking us to Gareth Southgate all summer, because obviously he worked with Brailsford, he worked with Ashworth and had a good relationship with Brailsford. Just because they worked together didn't mean that Ashworth wanted Southgate. He didn't. And now trying to pretend that they knew why Ashworth was sacked because he wanted Southgate. He didn't. We've actually got reliable sources coming out and breaking down what's happened today in the emergency meeting at Carrington's. We're going to break down the meeting, what's gone down, the real reason why Ashworth is gone. We'll then, spew through the nonsense. We'll talk about who the rumoured new sporting director is going to be, who's taking over temporarily. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about Ashworth's long-term replacement and more, because there's obviously a lot to talk about. So I want to dive right into the show. I will dive into the live chats in a second, but I just wanted to make it clear that Ashworth did not want Southgate, and that is people using United and this drama for clicks. An hour after Ashworth is sacked, people were claiming they have inside information that he wanted Southgate and that's why he's sacked. No, they knew that there was going to be clicks because people wanted to know why Ashworth was sacked, and they made up these stories. We've got actual information this second coming out from The Athletic, which is why my live stream is a bit later than normal. But there is a lot of information that's come out in the last 10 minutes from The Athletic. Laurie Whitwell, really good source of information. Adam Crafton gets inside information. David Ornstein, Fabrizio Romano, Simon Stone. They are people that will get actual information. They don't make shite up like a lot of people do. But we're going to talk about this. I just want to say, guys, we are on 98,694 subscribers. So I'm only 6 subscribers away from 98.7k. We're on the road to try and hit 100k subscribers by the end of the year, which we could do. I don't think we will, but we're 1,300 away. So you never know. But let's dive into this story about the friction, what's been going on. Friction was also apparent when Ashworth proposed bringing in data company to evaluate the candidates to replace Ten Hag. Ratcliffe was said to reacted badly, countering that it was Ashworth's job to know such matters, then outsource. We are also making questions of United's in-house capability. So, one of the reasons there was a fallout between Ashworth and Ratcliffe is because Ashworth wanted to bring in data companies, he wanted to bring in more people. Now, I'm going to tell you something about Dan Ashworth, and I'm going to say something about Jim Ratcliffe that I knew 3 months ago, before this shite went down, and maybe I should have taken it to occasion. So I had a conversation with a Brighton fan about Dan Ashworth. I had a conversation with a Newcastle fan about Dan Ashworth, but the Brighton fan is someone that is very familiar with Dan Ashworth and what he'd done. And we were speaking for like a good hour, and he gave me so much information. He said, Dan Ashworth isn't recruitment. Dan Ashworth is someone that likes to back his managers, give him time. Dan Ashworth is someone that tries to do everything possible to give the manager the best environment he can to succeed at United, which is what he tried to do with Ten Hag. He tried to bring in specialists to deal with them, to help the mentality of the squad. He brought in a lot of people for Ten Hag. He showed Ten Hag a lot of support. Dan Ashworth showed Ten Hag a mass amount of support, bringing in Rene Hake, Ruud van Nistelrooy, all the coaches, new people in the sports science department. He even brought in psychiatrists to work with the squad because that is what Dan Ashworth's about. Now, was that a mistake because we then sat Ten Hag 2 months into the season? Potentially. And maybe that's where Dan Ashworth has taken the fall because we've lost a lot of money in that. But at the end of the day, Dan Ashworth is being blamed for Ten Hag staying, but Dan Ashworth has a say in it, but he doesn't have an overriding say. So they all came to the decision for Ten Hag to stay, and I think they're trying to get Dan Ashworth to take the blame for that, if you want my honest opinion. But Dan Ashworth is someone that's known to be very patient and back his managers. He didn't sack Eddie Howe when things got bad at Newcastle, and I think that was the right decision. I think he's very much that, and he likes to bring in data. He's always gone with a data-driven approach, which is what Michael Edwards has done at Liverpool, and look how good Liverpool's recruitment has been. Because Michael Edwards brought in a data-driven approach to appoint Arne Slot. Dan Ashworth wanted to do the same, but they wouldn't let him do that. So I will tell you that. I think that's unfair. What we know about Jim Ratcliffe is he's not very patient. You've got someone very patient in Ashworth that goes for a data-driven approach that has similarities to Michael Edwards that's done wonders at Liverpool. And they went for Amorim, and then they decided against Amorim because the data suggested Slot, and that's worked out well for Liverpool. Yeah? So Dan Ashworth wanted this sort of data-driven approach. And Dan Ashworth is a patient guy who wants to back the manager. Ratcliffe is not patient. We spoke about this. A Nice column came out, and they said that Dan Ashworth constantly sacks people. He doesn't give anybody time, and that Nice had gone through many managers, many staff. So you've got, basically, Ratcliffe that likes to sack very quickly and wants instant results, and Ashworth that's more patient and believes in long-term success and short-term loss for long-term success. They've clashed. Ashworth had a more modern, patient approach, and personally myself, I prefer Ashworth's approach. I was told from a Brighton fan that knew a lot about Dan Ashworth that he's someone where at Brighton you didn't see what Dan Ashworth did in his first year. You couldn't see what Dan Ashworth had done in his first year at Brighton. But he said 3 years after Dan Ashworth was appointed, everything that Dan Ashworth did served Brighton for the greater good, and it's one of the reasons they are where they are today. Dan Ashworth, unfortunately, did not get that time at United. So that is obviously one of the reasons going on as well. We're sort of, I think Ratcliffe has, less patience, and I felt we were acting like Chelsea. This is giving, Chelsea kind of vibes. I can agree with that as well. But let's talk more about it. Someone says stop changing the mentality of the squad, just change the physicality by removing them, otherwise they'll break the vicious cycle. It's mentally and physically with the squad, for sure. It was said that Ratcliffe felt Ashworth should have been more assertive in targeting a new head coach and should have looked beyond those people he already knew. He also said to have raised eyebrows at Ashworth taking a holiday on Amorim's second day at Carrington. So there was obviously not good vibes. Now, obviously, we're going to dive into some stories in a minute about how Ashworth felt that he wasn't given a big enough say in major decisions. Now, this a bit contradicts itself because I feel United are trying to do PR and blame Ashworth for Ten Hag staying and all of that. And that's what a lot of reports are saying. Ashworth's gone because Ten Hag stayed. But then on the other side, we're getting told that Ashworth is unhappy because he didn't get a big enough say and his decisions were overruled. So you've got to make your mind up here. Did Ashworth choose to keep Ten Hag, or was Ashworth not actually ever saying Ten Hag staying or not? Because we were told 2 months ago, and I want to say this now. Journalists are coming out today saying that Ashworth has gone because INEOS did not agree with his decision to keep Ten Hag. These are the same journalists that said back in July that the reason that INEOS didn't sack Ten Hag is because Ashworth was not in place to help make a decision. So can these journalists, first of all, make up their minds? Because I think you're spewing shite, and some of them quite credible. But anyway, those inside Errington felt that Ashworth could be more assertive in targeting a new head coach and should have looked beyond people that he knew. They did not like that. Now, obviously, the obvious link is Southgate, but we haven't looked at Southgate. Dan Ashworth did not provide clear, compelling arguments for who to bring in. His list of managers included Eddie Howe, Marco Silva, Thomas Frank, and Graham Potter as potential interim, not permanent, interim. Now, is Southgate on that list? No, because Southgate was never on the list. And the journalists that are saying we're interested in Gyökeres are the journalists saying we're interested in Southgate. They know nothing about United, but they think Amorim and Gyökeres work together. We need attacking reinforcement. Let's pretend United are pursuing Gyökeres. We might be, but they don't know that because INEOS have kept what they're doing in the summer hush-hush because INEOS have not made summer plans. There's actually a meeting in 2 weeks for INEOS with Amorim to make their plans for 2025. And in 2 weeks' time, we might have more clarity on that. These are the same sources that are saying, oh, Ashworth wanted Southgate. Why? Because they work together. That must be why. No, it's guesswork. He suggested these managers as interim, which is not the most compelling list. But he wanted to bring in a data-driven approach. He wanted to look in more detail about the long-term manager, and maybe it wasn't his idea to bring Amorim in. I'm very happy with the Amorim appointment. Very, very happy with the Amorim appointment. But yes, INEOS made mistakes. They brought in loads of coaches. They gave Ten Hag a new contract. They sacked him. I think Ashworth is the scapegoat in this. I'm going to back Ashworth because from what I've heard in general, I think INEOS have made a mistake and they can sack him if they think they've made a mistake. But I think there's a lot of money being spent by INEOS. They're putting ticket prices up. They're sacking a lot of people. And as someone that has been very backing of INEOS and their approach, bringing in Barada, and very positive about INEOS, even though I made it clear I wanted a full sell, I said, you know what, I'm going to be positive about INEOS. I'm going to give them time. I do feel that that Ashworth is becoming the scapegoat. Now, Ashworth, I'm not comparing to Ed Woodward in any sense. Ed Woodward had to go. Ed Woodward was a disgrace to this football club. Dan Ashworth was not. But when the Glazers joined the Super League, that was on the Glazers. They lost the fans so much that Ed Woodward was sacked. Ed Woodward would have still been at Manchester United until INEOS had come in, had the Glazers not tried to join the Super League. But the Glazers sacked Ed Woodward to distract fans from the fact that they joined the Super League to get fans happy that Ed Woodward had been sacked. It was right that they sacked Ed Woodward. We were gassed that Ed Woodward was sacked. Dan Ashworth, nothing like Ed Woodward, very different context. But I do think now Dan Ashworth sacked, there's a lot of reports coming out that are PR from Manchester United to try and blame the fact that we gave Ten Hag a new contract, brought in all these coaches, sacked all these people. I do feel that they're almost trying to blame it on Ashworth a bit. In my opinion, that's what I think. And you could disagree with me as well. People saying, do you think Amorim asked for Ashworth to go? I don't think Amorim would have that kind of power. I think you've got to remember that they want this is why Amorim's a head coach, not a manager. And I think that Amorim won't have that kind of power. So I don't think Amorim would have asked Ashworth to go. To be honest, I really don't. Amorim would have joined Manchester United knowing he was working with Ashworth, and he wouldn't have said yes to it if he didn't want to work with Ashworth. That's my honest opinion on the matter. It was said Ashworth was said to have little input on selecting Amorim as United's new head coach, with Barada a major influence on the Portuguese getting the job. And I think Barada's done a very good job on that. I'm very happy with Amorim. I'm very confident that Amorim, if we can get our recruitment right, will succeed, but it will take time and patience, and hopefully Ratcliffe does that. It was Barada who flew to Lisbon when Ten Hag was sacked to negotiate with Sporting, blah, blah, blah. So clearly Barada's, been doing a very good job. They may feel that Ashworth has been slacking, and that is why they've sacked him. Personally, I think it was the wrong decision to sack Ashworth, but we don't know what's gone in behind the scenes because apparently there was a lot of tension. There was a lot of tension, a lot of friction, but I think Ashworth is someone that we should be given 3 to 5 years at this club to see what he can do, because from what I heard about Ashworth from what he did at Brighton, I think he's very good as well. Continuing on. Sir Dave Brailsford, Omar Barada and Jason Wilcox addressed Manchester United players and staff at Carrington today, going through the turbulent experience with Dan Ashworth's departure and why they felt it was necessary. So the players have now been informed today about why they got rid of Dan Ashworth and why they felt it was necessary. Quick hold up, guys. I just want to let you know that we're on 98,699 subscribers right now. So I'm only one subscriber away from 98.7k. So if you are new and you're enjoying the content so far, please do subscribe down below. I try and go live every single evening on the channel to keep you up to date on all the latest Manchester United news, stories, and more. But we will dive into some more detail. But there was a meeting at Carrington today. There was an emergency meeting. And yeah, we're going to discuss potential candidates in a second as well. We're going to discuss a few more things as well. Alice, what do you think of Ruud van Nistelrooy winning the draw for Leicester, coming down back from 2-0 behind? You know what? Michael Carrick and Ruud van Nistelrooy doing well. Always feels good. Always feels good as well. I'm just looking at a few live chat comments and I will get into the next story. Ratcliffe is angry with where the club is and lashed out. It's simple. I told you all, Ratcliffe's not the answer. Do you know what, Chris? I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I do have a slight worry about that. And you're being correct about that. I think that Ratcliffe is a very reactionary fan. And we see it in the fan base on Twitter. We see it on the fan base on Twitter, and I'm not comparing Ratcliffe to a Twitter fan, not at all. He's a very clever businessman. But we'll see, with Ten Hag, there was fans that were very angry and wanted Ten Hag gone, and there were fans saying, look, there's bigger problems than the manager. This I'm talking more about last season. This player's injured. The recruitment's been crap. INEOS are coming in and he's actually going to have good recruitment around him. And look what he did at Ajax. There's two ways the fan base look. Some looked, and I'm talking last season because this season was atrocious, but last season people spoke about the injuries, what he did at Ajax, and him working with awful recruitment, Murta and Arnold. But then some fans were like, no, he's got to go, he's awful. Ratcliffe is one of those fans that I think as soon as things get bad, he gets frustrated and he lashes in the emotions, while other fans are saying, well, let's look at the bigger picture. And I think that might be a problem with INEOS. And that was someone who was a Nice fan said to me, that's the one thing you got to worry about, is that maybe Jim Ratcliffe can be over-aggressive in his approach. That's what someone said to me. Maybe Jim Ratcliffe can be over-aggressive in his approach. Crikey, the atmosphere must be awful. Really feel for Ruben Amorim walking into the busiest part of the playing schedule. I really feel for Ruben Amorim because Ruben Amorim walked in thinking he was going to be working with Dan Ashworth. I know that for a fact. He walked in thinking he'd be working to Dan Ashworth. Ruben Amorim getting the job is not the reason Ashworth has been sacked. Ruben Amorim does not have that kind of power. Manchester United would not want to give a manager that kind of power. Dan Ashworth is seen as above Ruben Amorim, just to give you guys context. But Ruben Amorim coming in thinking he's going to work with Dan Ashworth. INEOS are trying to sell that the structure is more composed, they're more organised, this or that. It's different this time. Amorim's got a crazy fixture, realised the players aren't that good, and then sent Dan Ashworth, who is the person in the club that will show more support to the manager than anybody else. He showed Ten Hag the most support. He would show Amorim the most support. Dan Ashworth will go out of his way to make sure Amorim has what he wants, is the one that has been sacked. Amorim's not going to be happy with that. Amorim's going to have some concerns. And INEOS got to be organised and got to sort out. It might be a really smart decision from INEOS down the line, and they might bring someone else in. Tixey's available. He's left Manchester City. Something interesting could happen there. You never know. But yeah, I don't think it was the right decision. But we'll have to see what happens. But I think that's on INEOS rushing and making an aggressive approach because they're not happy where things are. INEOS and board management going crazy this summer in the transfer window. Wait, the thing that worries me is FFP. If we're spending all this money on compensation from sacking and bringing people in, this will impact our transfer window. That is another thing that does, elements of it does worry me as well. Guys, we've got 1,150 people watching right now, so big up everybody that's tuned in. Thank you everybody for the support. It's really, really appreciated. If you're enjoying the content, please do go ahead and hit that like button. We're going to dive into some stories that came out a little bit earlier today. I just wanted to get the Athletic report out the way first because I felt that was the most relevant and the most correct with its information as well. And we've obviously got news that Will Cox has a very good relationship with Amorim, an interim director of recruitment. Vival has a very good relationship with Amorim, and we've got other bits of that story that I might dive into as well, but I didn't want to just dive into the full story. But I do want to talk about a few things that's been said by the likes of Romano and stuff as well. But I want to quickly share this. I think this is the best summary from what has been said by the Athletic on what's really gone down, because I think there was a lot of fake news earlier. When searching for replacements for Erik ten Hag, Jim Ratcliffe wanted to hear Ashworth's ideas due to his expertise in building structures. Ashworth did not provide clear, compelling arguments for who to bring in. Obviously, Eddie Howe, Silva and Frank and Potter were potential interims. Ratcliffe wanted more decisiveness and a dynamic appointment, someone with certain charisma who was capable of shouldering enormous responsibility and scrutiny that comes with leading one of the world's biggest clubs. It's why, apparently, he's been sacked, just for context there. But I want to dive into what's been said by the likes of Fabrizio Romano and more inside Manchester United. Hi, Alice, bad weekend for United and soon. Yeah, I mean, Newcastle fans are loving that Dan Ashworth's been sacked, but I don't think that's not on Dan Ashworth for me. I think that's on, Dan Ashworth joining a club where, it's not been run by the best people as well. People saying INEOS track record with Nice is awful. They finished 5th in League One last season, currently sitting 6th right now. They've clearly stabilised and so will we. And I was about to add that, Nick, to be fair. They're very aggressive with Nice. They sacked a lot of people, but they're better off for it now. Do we want to wait 4 or 5 years? Not particularly. I do think long-term will be better under INEOS than the Glazers. I don't think it takes a genius to say that. And I think long-term, I still feel we're in the right direction. But I do think sacking Ashworth just put concerns in me in terms of how reactionary that is. And could that be a step back as well? Do you think they'd go for Ralph Rangnick? I'd be very surprised. So we're going to dive into what Fabrizio Romano has had to say on the matter. Fabrizio Romano said this. Ten Hag was close to being fired even after winning the FA Cup, but Dan Ashworth's view was to continue with Ten Hag, which led to a terrible start to the season, and then Ten Hag being sacked and replaced with Ruben Amorim just 2 to 3 months later. Sir Jim Ratcliffe considered this defeat failure. So he considered what Ashworth had done in keeping Ten Hag, and then us having to spend about 20-30 million extra to sack him. and bringing Amorim is seen as a very costly mistake that's cost Ashworth his job. It was also said by David Ornstein that INEOS were not happy with the job that Dan Ashworth was doing. There was rumblings about discontent for some time. Jason Wilcox is thought of highly by the hierarchy and Ruben Amorim. There was a feeling the new regime was too bloated. So I did say this. I said INEOS bringing in too many experts could also not be a good thing as well. Because I said we had a lot of good people we're bringing in, but obviously maybe there was overcrowding in each job. You know, that's something that Ornstein potentially suggests. Is Hugo Viana an option now? Well, I believe he is at City and that's a done deal, so I don't think so. Well, him going to City is a done deal. We might get Tixie. It was said that Dan Ashworth felt sidelined from big decisions at Manchester United almost from day one, with Omar Barada and Sir Dave Brailsford calling the shots. I don't agree with Sir Dave Brailsford calling the shots when he's not a football man. I'm going to make that clear. The tipping point was Ruben Amorim's appointment. Ashworth wanted a British coach, Gareth Southgate. Now, this is the BS news, by the way. So I believe that maybe there was frustration from Ashworth that he wasn't being allowed to call the shots because it was bloated. These stories came out early today. The Athletic has already confirmed that he did not want Southgate, just to let you know. But I just wanted to dive into these. Dan Ashworth wanted Southgate at Eddie Howe. There was clear tension. Ashworth said no to Xerxes and De Ligt. Sir Jim and Dave felt serious pressure. So, I mean, if this is true, then Yoro, Mazraoui and Agate have been our three best signings, which apparently is who Ashworth wanted. He said no to De Ligt and Xerxes. He got his recruitment pretty spot on, so not a sackable offence. But again, we know it's now been confirmed that he never wanted Southgate. So there's a lot of reports coming out that they wanted Southgate and that's why he's been sacked. And that's why you've got to be really careful because the media is making things up because they know it's going to get clicks and it's going to make them money. Again, here, Dan Ashworth was not in favour of appointing Ruben Amorim. He was not involved in the process of Ruben Amorim. Apparently, he wanted us to go for Southgate. Again, not true. So I want to clear this up because a lot of people think that he was sacked because he wanted Southgate. It's been cleared up by The Athletic. I cleared it up earlier. That's not the case. He never wanted Southgate. English managers he looked at. Was Southgate one of them? No. Two people really believe these stories about Ashworth wanting Southgate and that being the reason he was sacked. The same sources who lied about INEOS being interested in Southgate are now saying this to cover their tracks, while all the credible sources have denied it. And just people using it for clicks, like those claiming we would go all out for Gyökeres as soon as Amorim was announced. They had zero info, they just guessed and wrote a story for clicks. It's pure guesswork placed on the player and manager relationships, just like with Ashworth and Southgate, because they had a previous relationship. While Ashworth had some differences and views with Sir Jim Ratcliffe, all reliable sources have confirmed that Southgate was never on the table. So I wanted to clear up the reason he was sacked. They didn't like Ashworth's lack of decisiveness, he didn't step up in big decisions, but it did not have anything to do with Gareth Southgate. I wanted to get that nonsense news out of the way because I think a lot of people are buying into those stories and it's TalkSport. For me, if you've got Laurie Whitwell, who's got inside information and brilliant access to the club telling you one thing, and you've got TalkSport telling you another thing, who are anti-United, by the way, it's very obvious who you need to believe, and that is Laurie Whitwell. That is Laurie Whitwell. Now, we're going to talk about potential replacements. We're going to talk what's going to be happening short term. Andrea Berta is an option to replace Dan Ashworth, but Di Marzio, who used to be clever, I think has turned into a clickbait merchant. Di Marzio used to be very good, used to be very reliable, and then he put out reports 2 days before the FA Cup final that Ten Hag was 100% being sacked, which wasn't necessarily wrong because the decision before the FA Cup was to potentially sack Ten Hag, but I think he jumped the gun. We were interviewing managers before the FA Cup. Di Marzio found out about that. He jumped the gun and assumed that Ten Hag had been sacked. But apparently Andrea Berta is an option. And apparently Jason Wilcox will take over Dan Ashworth's role in the short term. He obviously built the Southampton squad to get them promoted back into the Premier League with Russell Martin there. So Jason Wilcox is stepping up there as well. So let me dive into this. So I don't want Andrea Berta. Andrea Berta is the guy that spent 85 million on Julian Alvarez. Julian Alvarez is max a £50 million player. For me, max a £50 million player. How Manchester City got 85 million for him, I will never know. I think he's a good player. He's got 5 goals and 2 assists in 16 Bundesliga matches. 24 years of age, he's still young. But Julian Alvarez, the money that they spent on him, I don't think Atletico's recruitment has been very good under him, this summer at least. So it wouldn't be my first choice. Alice, should we go for Paul Mitchell just to wind up Newcastle? Yes, no. Oh, the camera's gone. It's that Newcastle fan must have done that. It would be funny if we went for Paul Mitchell. I think in terms of recruitment, Paul Mitchell's what you want. But in terms of building structures, you would want someone more like a Dougie Freedman. Dougie Freedman could be an interesting one. But what I do worry about, and this is a bit off topic, but I do think, well, if they've seen that Ashworth's been sacked after 5 months, if we do go and approach Dougie Freedman, and he's seen that INEOS have sacked this person, Dan Ashworth only got 5 months on this friction at the club, do you think Dougie Freedman's going to want to go to United? I know that he's at Palace, so there's an upgrade, but he rejected Newcastle. He rejected Newcastle in the summer, so, that's something that we could look at as well. Someone said they're going to put Jason in Ashworth's place. I think so. It'll be interesting to see who they bring in as well. Why not go for Sporting Director of Football? Because Manchester City already have him. I believe it's a done deal with Hugo Viana. I believe it's a done deal because Tixey's obviously confirmed he's leaving. We might get Tixey, who obviously worked with Barada at City. You never know because of their relationship. We might get him. I don't know. But I don't know if he's retiring. I don't know why he's leaving City. He's also very much caught up in that 1-1-15 trial, a 1-1-5 trial, and I don't know if United want to get in too much in the midst of that or bring someone in who could then be getting in trouble as well. Alice Forson McTominay at Lazio, doing a very good job at at Napoli, doing a very good job at Napoli because he suits the system and stuff. McTominay doesn't suit the way we want to play and doesn't suit our system. Is he a bad player? No, but with the way we wanted to play, he wasn't good enough. Did he have the athleticism for Ruben Amorim to probably like him in one of those 10 roles? Do you know what? Potentially. But I think McTominay had to go when you think of us being a possession team long term. But I think, he's doing well at Napoli, but he suits the system there as well. I don't really watch a lot of Napoli, to be honest. Don't go for my Dougie Freedman, says Diego. Big up everybody watching right now. I just want to thank everyone that's tuning in. We did hit a 98.7k. We're on 98,718 subscribers, which is absolutely amazing. We're less than 1,300 subscribers away from 100k, so maybe we will hit it by the end of 2024, which would be mad. Absolutely mad as well. Alice, who would you bring in if you could bring anyone to replace Dan Ashworth? Good question. I'd bring in Michael Edwards. One, because he's at Liverpool and he's not spent a load of money and he's got recruitment spot on for Liverpool. He got the decision of Arne Slot spot on for Liverpool. He's got a data-driven approach. And two, because there would be Liverpool tears. You make Liverpool weaker. You annoy the Liverpool fan base, but you also bring in Michael Edwards. That, for me, best of the best. So that was who I'd bring in. Do I think we'll bring him in? Absolutely not. I think we've got no chance in hell of that. But yeah, that is who I'd bring in. We can continue into some more stories here. Again, this isn't the most reliable source of information, but this is what's been said. Jason Wilcox and Christopher Bivell are set for enhanced roles as they assume the responsibility held by Ashworth at Carrington. The decision was solely Ratcliffe's, but came after speaking to Brailsford and Blanc. So apparently, again, Ratcliffe was key to sacking Ashworth, which I think is probably somewhat accurate. It was also said, it's clear that things were not working out with Ashworth behind the scenes. From United's perspective, it was better to bite the bullet than limp on. There was a strong working dynamic and understanding between Barada and Wilcox, which did not extend to Dan Ashworth. There's few reports of fallouts behind the scenes. Barada wields a huge influence at Old Trafford, and that influence is only growing. Ashworth had established a closer relationship with Ten Hag, with Wilcox and Barada firmly of the view of a change of manager was essential if United were to move forward. Whereas Barada and Wilcox gelled with each other and INEOS' wider way of working, Ashworth did not prove the same fit. This becomes more apparent as weeks and months passed. There was no fireworks or ugly fallouts, is what they've said. Other sources have said it got heated. There was a few fallouts and disagreements. Dan Ashworth felt undermined, but we again are waiting for more information on that. But it seems there was a big difference in opinion. And for me, I think it's got nothing to do with Ashworth wanting Southgate because he never wanted Southgate. I think it's got something to do with the fact that Ashworth has a very patient approach. INEOS don't. Jim Ratcliffe wants change. He wants change now. He does not want to wait around. He's a United fan. He's getting frustrated where we're at. Dan Ashworth is more patient. He likes to give time. And I think their way of thinking, Dan Ashworth wanted to involve data, take a bit longer. I think their way of thinking clashed. I think that's what it was. It was said that Barada has very quickly earned the trust of Sir Jim, Sir Dave and Jean-Claude Blanc. United have thought to not be in a rush to appoint Dan Ashworth's replacement. The Muppeteers said, ultimately, Ashworth has left because he did not share the same views as other key decision makers. Disagreements over Ten Hag recruitment and more, it just made it a bad fit. United want to completely align all the way down. So it's looking like it was an issue where they felt that Ashworth did not align with the squad. I think that is what it seems to be as well. The issue was INEOS wanted to put a full structure in place. However, they didn't hire from the top down. CEO needed to say then Wilcock's position. It was all rushed. I do somewhat agree with that as well. I think you make a good point as well. Alice, Michael Edwards, an Arsenal set piece coach. Absolutely. Imagine. Brilliant stuff as well. If Dan Ashworth didn't want Circus and De Ligt, that's good news. I don't rate them. Out of the 3 signings, Mazraoui, value for money, has probably been the best bit of business we've done in the last 10 years. Yoro, I can comfortably say after watching him play 2 games, he's going to be a superstar. And Agate has been our best player the last 6 games. The 3 signings that Ashworth suggested was Mazraoui, Agate, and Yoro. They're the 3 months that Ashworth wanted. He didn't approve Cirque and he didn't approve De Ligt, who've probably been the 2 most disappointing. I don't think that De Ligt's been bad. I think he's been all right, but I think he's more suited to a back 4 than a back 5, which we're seeing under Amorim. Yeah, it's crazy. You can't. I think Ashworth got his recruitment spot on and he's more patient, but they disagreed on that. But it seems to be all the issues was to do with Ashworth not aligning with the views of those above him, because the views of those above him were maybe a little bit more aggressive. Mike Keegan said that Dan Ashworth claimed that he had nothing to do with keeping Ten Hag at Manchester United, infuriated Sir Jim Ratcliffe and played a part in his shock departure. Talks are set to take place over the coming days. Dan Ashworth said that he was not involved in the decision to keep Ten Hag, which again is interesting because the reason he's gone is because Ten Hag stayed and they're blaming him for that. But Dan Ashworth is claiming that's not true. We're going to do a video tomorrow talking about what Dan Ashworth has come out and said and Dan Ashworth's comments. So if you're interested to know it from Dan Ashworth's perspective and what he's saying, make sure you subscribe because I will do a video on that tomorrow morning. Probably just a 10-minute roundup video rather than a new stream as well. United need to sell 14 players this summer and bring in 14. I mean, I don't think that's possible, but we do need a big clear out and we do need a few new signings as well. Sounds like Ashworth might have been the driving force behind wanting Branthwaite, but for half of the 70 million it would have cost them. I'm glad we got De Ligt. I think value for money, De Ligt was better deal. But Ashworth made sure we didn't spend more than 55 million on Branthwaite. He said the max is 55 million. So he probably wanted Branthwaite, but he wasn't going to do a John Murter. And John Murter put 85 million on Anthony. Ashworth would want Branthwaite, but he will know not to put more than 50 million on him because he's got a brain. Dan Ashworth conducted himself with integrity and decency throughout his time at Manchester United. United have been building a new sporting structure as of late, with the process moving at pace and the club learning what the best structure is to get United winning again, is what's been said. We will dive into what Ashworth's statement is and more, but I just thought this would be a good live stream to sort of I think give context to everything going on at United because quite a lot has been going on. But I think the whole Ashworth situation is messy. And I think we've had a lot of fake news and fake information come out about that whole situation. So I thought I'll do a live stream. I'll clear out what the reliable sources are saying. What is the fake news? So now we sort of have an idea of what's really going on. And we'll get some more information very, very soon. But guys, please do go ahead and hit that like button if you enjoyed today's video. You're welcome to subscribe down below if you're new. We're on that road to 100k. I'm going to wrap up the show here. Thank you everyone for tuning in. See you next time. Bye.